A billionaire fell in love with a poor receptionist's honesty. He married her devotion. He woke up beside her ambition. The problem? They were three different women, but only two bodies. And by the time he discovered the truth, he'd already lost the only one who was real. Please like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, when would you have noticed the lie? Chidi Okafor touched his watch again. It was a habit he'd developed over the years, this brushing of his thumb against the face of his Patek Philippe, as if the cool sapphire crystal could somehow clarify his thoughts. He stood at the window of his office on the 32nd floor, phone pressed to his ear, listening to a man in New York explain why the Q3 projections were conservative estimates. The city below looked like a circuit board, lights beginning to blink on as the sun dropped behind the haze, cars moving in efficient lines along Ozumba Mbadiwe, the lagoon dark and still in the distance. We're looking at a 40% increase if we expand into the East African market by January, the voice said. Chidi murmured. He wasn't really listening anymore. The conversation ended the way these conversations always ended, with promises, with projections, with the kind of confidence that came from men who'd never actually been poor. Chidi ended the call and set his phone on the glass desk. The screen stayed dark, no messages, no missed calls. He touched his watch again. The office was silent except for the low hum of the air conditioning. His assistant had left an hour ago. The cleaners wouldn't come until midnight. Chidi stood there, alone in a room that cost more than most people in Lagos earned in a decade, and felt nothing. He picked up his briefcase, Italian leather, soft as skin, and headed for the elevator. The penthouse in Ikoyi smelled like lavender and lemon polish. Chidi stepped inside and set his briefcase by the door, slipping off his loafers and leaving them perfectly aligned on the shoe rack. Mama Ngozi was in the kitchen, ironing. She always ironed at night, said the heat was easier to bear after the sun went down. She was humming something low and tuneless, the kind of song that wasn't really a song, just sound to fill the silence. "Good evening, sir," she said without looking up. "Evening, Mama." Chidi walked past her toward the fridge, pulled out a bottle of water. The wine fridge beside it was stocked with bottles he never opened, gifts from business partners, colleagues, people trying to impress him. He looked at them the way you'd look at strangers at a party. "You've eaten?" "Yes, sir," he nodded, unscrewed the cap, drank. He didn't ask what she'd eaten, didn't ask if she'd eaten here or taken something home to her children, whose names he didn't know. It wasn't that he didn't care. It was that caring required a kind of attention he'd trained himself not to give. The marble floors were cool under his feet as he walked to the bedroom. Everything in the penthouse was clean, cold, expensive. The kind of space that appeared in architecture magazines. He stood in the doorway and looked at his bed. King-sized, untouched, the sheets pulled so tight you could bounce a coin off them. He touched his watch. Then he showered, ate cereal from a box that cost 3,000 naira, and went to bed. Across the city, in a one-room flat in Yaba, Neoma Eze was trying to make soup stretch. She knelt in front of the kerosene stove, stirring the pot with a wooden spoon that had gone gray from years of use. The soup was thin, more water than vegetables, the palm oil floating on top in sad little circles. She'd already added the last of the crayfish. There was no meat. There hadn't been meat in 2 weeks. Behind her, Adaeze sat on the edge of the mattress they shared, painting her nails a bright, defiant red. She had one leg crossed over the other, her phone propped on her knee, her face lit blue by the screen. "Ne, bring me water," Mama Eze said from the corner. Neoma stood immediately, wiping her hands on the wrapper tied around her waist. She poured water from the clay pot into a plastic cup, careful not to spill. Mama was propped against 2 pillows that had gone flat, her body so thin now that Neoma could see the outline of her ribs even through her blouse. Her hair, once thick and gray and neatly braided, lay loose around her face like smoke. Neoma knelt beside her, holding the cup to her lips. Mama drank slowly, her hands trembling. When she finished, she touched Neoma's cheek, her palm dry and warm. "You're a good girl," Mama whispered. Neoma smiled, the kind of smile that hurt. "Rest, Mama." She stood and returned to the stove. Adaeze didn't look up. The fluorescent bulb overhead flickered once, twice, then steadied. It did that every night. Neoma had learned not to flinch. She stirred the soup and wondered if it would be enough. Adayas hated the flat. She hated the flickering bulb, the kerosene stove, the bucket they used to bathe, the corner where they hung their wrappers to dry. She hated the smell of illness that clung to everything now, the way Mama's cough sounded wet and deep, like something breaking apart inside her. She hated the way Neoma moved through it all with that soft, patient face, like suffering was something noble. She scrolled through Instagram, past photos of girls her age in Dubai, in London, in places where the floors didn't crack and the water ran hot, girls with identical faces and different lives. She paused on a photo of a girl standing in front of a pool, wearing a bikini that probably cost more than their rent. The caption said, "Blessed." Adayas's thumb hovered over the screen. Behind her, Mama's cough started again. It rattled through the room, harsh and rhythmic. Neoma was there instantly, kneeling, patting Mama's back, murmuring something soft. Adayas didn't turn around. She kept scrolling. When the coughing finally stopped, Neoma said quietly, "Ada, we need to talk about the surgery." Adayas sighed and set her phone down. She blew on her nails. "What's there to talk about?" "The doctor said Mama needs it soon, before the end of the month." "I know. It's 300,000 naira. I know." Neoma stood, wiping her hands again. She looked at her sister, and Adayas could see it in her face, that stupid, stubborn hope. "We can ask the church, or maybe." "The church?" Adayas laughed, sharp and bitter. "Nay, the church can't even fix their own roof. You think they have 300,000 naira sitting around?" "God will provide," Neoma said softly. Adayas stood. She crossed the small space between them, her eyes hard. "God is not a bank, Neoma." For a moment they just looked at each other, identical faces, different worlds behind their eyes. Then Adayas picked up her phone and went back to scrolling. The clinic in Yaba looked like it had been painted once, maybe a decade ago, and never touched since. The walls were the color of old teeth. The air conditioner in the waiting room had stopped working sometime last year, and now patients sat under the ceiling fan, fanning themselves with whatever they had, newspapers, patient files, their hands. The floor was linoleum, cracked in places, patched in others with duct tape that had gone gray. Neoma sat at the front desk, fanning herself with a patient file, her twists pulled back into a ponytail. She wore a blouse she'd bought secondhand at Yaba Market, blue with small flowers, and a skirt she'd sewn herself. Her shoes were flats, the kind that pinched after an hour but cost only 1,500 naira. A woman came through the door carrying a baby, the child's wails cutting through the thick air. Neoma stood immediately. "Good afternoon, Ma." The woman looked exhausted, her wrapper slipping off one shoulder, her face shining with sweat. "This boy will not stop crying. I don't know what is wrong with him." Neoma came around the desk, her smile warm and immediate. "It's okay, Ma. The doctor will see you. Please sit down." She pulled out a chair, gestured for the woman to sit. "What's his name?" "Chinedu." "Chinedu," Neoma repeated, crouching down so she was eye level with the baby. She touched his tiny hand, and his wails softened into hiccups. "He's strong. Look at him. What a strong boy." The woman's shoulders relaxed, just a little. Neoma straightened, went to the water dispenser and filled a cup. She brought it back and handed it to the woman. "Drink, Ma. You'll feel better." The woman took the cup, her eyes grateful. Neoma returned to her desk and added the woman's name to the waiting list. There were already 12 people ahead of her. The doctor was running late, the way he always did. No one complained. This was the kind of clinic where you were grateful just to be seen. Neoma sat back down and fanned herself. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, asking if she'd bought bread on the way home. She hadn't. There was no money for bread. She texted back, "We'll try." Then she slipped the phone back into her pocket, smiled at the woman with the baby, and waited. Chidi hated waiting. He sat in the clinic in Yaba, his legs crossed, his jaw tight, trying not to think about the meeting he was missing. His driver, Emeka, had called him that morning in a panic. His daughter was sick, fever, vomiting, the kind of sick that made a parent's voice shake. Emeka had been with Chidi for 5 years. He was reliable, quiet, never asked for anything. So Chidi had told him to take the day, and he'd driven himself to the clinic Emeka recommended. Now he was here, in a waiting room that smelled like antiseptic and sweat, surrounded by people who stared at him like he'd wandered in from another planet. He checked his watch. He'd been waiting 20 minutes. "Excuse me, sir?" He looked up. The receptionist was standing in front of him, a cup of water in her hand. She was young, mid-20s maybe, with a face that was open and kind. She wore a blouse with small flowers and a skirt that looked homemade. Her smile showed a gap between her front teeth. "You've been waiting a while," she said. "Would you like some water?" Chidi blinked. "I'm fine." "Are you sure? It's very hot today." He looked at her more closely. She didn't recognize him, didn't know who he was, didn't know that his face had been in This Day last month, that his company had just closed a deal worth 2 billion naira. She just saw a man. "I'm sure," he said, softer this time. She smiled again, that gap-toothed, unself-conscious smile, and set the cup on the table beside him anyway, just in case. Then she walked back to her desk. Chidi watched her go. She moved with a kind of ease, greeting an elderly man who'd just come in, helping a child find his mother. She laughed at something the child said, her whole body shaking with it. He touched his watch. 20 minutes later, when the doctor finally called him in, Chidi stood and glanced back at the desk. She was writing something down, her head bent, her pen moving quickly across the page. "Excuse me," he said. She looked up. "What's your name?" She blinked, surprised. Then she smiled. "Naoma." He said it again, slower, like he was tasting it. "Naoma." "Yes, sir." He nodded. "Thank you for the water." Her smile widened. "You're welcome." He walked into the doctor's office, and for the first time in months, Chidi Okafor felt something shift. Chidi came back to the clinic 3 days later. He told himself it was to check on Emeka's daughter. That was reasonable. That was what a good employer did. He parked his Mercedes 2 streets away. The roads in Yaba were too narrow, too crowded, and walked the rest of the way in the heat. Naoma looked up when he entered, and her face brightened in a way that made his chest feel strange. "Good afternoon, sir," she said, standing. "Is everything okay? Is Emeka's daughter?" "She's fine," Chidi said quickly. "I just wanted to check." "Oh," Naoma smiled, that gap-toothed smile. "That's very kind of you." He nodded, stood there. He should leave now. He had a conference call in 40 minutes. "Would you like some water?" she asked. He almost laughed. "Yes, thank you." She brought him a cup, her fingers brushing his briefly as she handed it over. He drank, even though he wasn't thirsty, and asked her how her day was going. She told him about the baby who wouldn't stop crying, the old man who tried to pay in yams, the nurse who kept singing gospel songs off-key in the back room. She made poverty sound like a story worth telling. When he left, he didn't mention that he'd be back. But he came back 5 days later, then 4 days after that, then twice in 1 week. He brought excuses at first, a checkup he didn't need, questions about the clinic's operations that he pretended to care about. Then he stopped pretending. One afternoon, he arrived with a takeout pack from a restaurant in Lekki, jollof rice, fried plantain, chicken so tender it fell off the bone. He set it on Naoma's desk. She stared at it like he'd brought her gold. "Sir, I can't accept this." "You can," Chidi said, "and you will." She looked up at him, her eyes wide. Then slowly she smiled. "Thank you." She shared it with the nurses. All of them. Chidi watched from the waiting room as she divided the rice into equal portions, laughing as one of the nurses tried to claim the biggest piece of chicken. She didn't keep any extra for herself. Chidi touched his watch and thought, I want to know this woman. That night, Naoma told Adaze about the man. They were sitting on the mattress, Naoma combing out her twists, Adaze scrolling through her phone. Mama was asleep in the corner, her breathing shallow and uneven. "There's this man who's been coming to the clinic," Naoma said quietly. Adaze didn't look up. He's very kind. He brought me lunch today, rice from one of those places with air conditioning." That got Adaze's attention. She lowered her phone. "He brought you lunch?" Naoma nodded, her cheeks warming. "I shared it with the nurses, but still, it was nice." "What does he look like?" "Tall, well-dressed. He has this watch he keeps touching." "What kind of car does he drive?" Naoma blinked. "I don't know. I've never seen it." Adaze sat up straighter. "What's his name?" Chidi Okafor." Adaisy's fingers moved quickly across her phone screen. She typed the name into Google and the results loaded instantly. Her breath caught. Chidi Okafor, CEO, CloudLink Technologies, net worth estimated at C5.8 billion. Her hand started to shake. Nay, she said slowly, her voice tight. Do you know who this man is? Neoma looked over, confused. He's just a man, a nice man. Adais turned the phone around, showed her the screen. Neoma's eyes went wide. That's him? Yes. Adaisy's mind was already racing, already calculating. That's him. Neoma looked down at her hands. He never said. Of course he didn't. Adaisy set the phone down, her heart pounding. Men like that don't need to. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Neoma said very quietly, he asked me to dinner. Adaisy's head snapped up. What? Tomorrow, a cafe in Lekki. I told him I'd think about it. You told him you'd think about it? Adais grabbed her sister's arm. Nay, you say yes, right now. You call him and you say yes. Neoma hesitated. I don't know, Ada. What if nothing? Adaisy's grip tightened. This is it. This is the door opening. You walk through it. Neoma looked at Mama, still sleeping, still sick. She thought about the hospital bills, the surgery they couldn't afford, the soup that never had enough. She thought about the way Chidi had looked at her when he asked, like she was someone worth knowing. Okay, she whispered. I'll go. Adais smiled. Good. But her mind was already somewhere else, already imagining what a man like that could do for them. For Mama. For the flat with the flickering light and the cracked floor. For her. The date was perfect. Chidi took her to a quiet cafe in Lekki, the kind of place with soft music and tablecloths that had been ironed. Neoma wore Adaisy's good blouse, the one she saved for weddings, and spent the entire car ride trying not to wrinkle it. Chidi asked her questions. Real questions. What did she like to read? What made her laugh? What did she want if she could have anything? Neoma answered honestly because she didn't know how to lie. She told him about the novels she borrowed from the church library, the way she and Adaizy used to dance in the rain as children, the dream she'd had once of becoming a nurse but couldn't afford the training. Chidi listened. Not the way people pretended to listen, nodding while their eyes wandered. He listened, leaning forward, his elbows on the table, his gaze steady. When it was his turn, he told her about growing up in Enugu, about building his company from nothing, about the loneliness that came with success. I'm surrounded by people all the time, he said, but I don't think any of them actually see me. Neoma looked at him, and for a moment she forgot about the expensive watch, the tailored shirt, the car waiting outside. She just saw a man who was tired. I see you, she said softly. Chidi went still. Then he smiled, slow and genuine. I know, he said. When he dropped her off 2 streets from the flat, she didn't want him to see where she lived, not yet. He touched her hand briefly. Can I see you again? Yes, Neoma said and meant it. She walked home in the dark, her heart so full she thought it might burst. Adais was waiting. Neoma came through the door glowing, her face soft and open in a way Adaizy hadn't seen in years. She sat down on the mattress and told her everything. The cafe, the questions, the way he looked at her. He wants to see me again, Neoma said, her voice trembling with happiness. Ada, I think he really likes me. That's wonderful, Adaizy said, and she meant it. But as Neoma changed out of the good blouse and hung it carefully on the line, Adaizy looked across the room at Mama. She was awake now, staring at the ceiling, her lips moving in silent prayer. Adaizy thought about the surgery. 300,000 naira. A number so big it didn't feel real. She thought about the flat, the flickering bulb, the thin soup, the endless suffocating weight of not enough. She thought about Chidi Okafor and his 5.8 billion. And she thought, what if? The weeks that followed felt like a dream Neoma was afraid to wake from. Chidi took her to dinners in places where the menus had no prices. He took her to the beach at sunset, to a quiet art gallery in Victoria Island, where she stood in front of paintings she didn't understand but pretended to appreciate. He bought her things, a scarf she admired in passing, a pair of earrings she'd never have chosen for herself, and waved away her protests like they were nothing. Because to him, they were nothing. Neoma tried to be herself, tried to ignore the voice in her head that said she didn't belong in these spaces, with these people, in this life. Chidi's friends were polite but distant, the kind of people who smiled with their mouths and judged with their eyes. She wore the same dress twice to two different events. No one said anything, but she noticed the looks. Chidi didn't seem to care. "You're real," he told her once, after a dinner where she'd accidentally used the wrong fork and laughed at herself. "Everyone else is performing. You're just you." She kissed him for that. It was the first time she'd kissed anyone, and meant it. But Mama was getting worse. The cough that had been wet and occasional became constant, rattling through the flat at all hours. Neoma came home from dates to find Adaz wiping Mama's forehead with a damp cloth, her jaw tight, her eyes hard. "The doctor said we need to move fast," Adaz said one night. "If we don't do the surgery soon." "I know," Neoma said. "Do you?" Adaz stood, her voice sharp. "Because you're out there eating fancy rice while Mama is here dying." The words hit like a slap. "That's not fair," Neoma whispered. "Isn't it?" Adaz crossed her arms. "You have a rich boyfriend now, Nay. Have you asked him for help?" "I can't just—" "Why not?" "Because it's not like that." Neoma's voice cracked. "He doesn't even know. He doesn't know how we live. If I ask him for money, he'll think you need help, which you do." Adazi stepped closer, her face softening just slightly. "I'm not saying marry him for his money. I'm saying let him help. If he cares about you, he'll want to." Neoma looked at Mama, her chest rising and falling unevenly. "I'll think about it," she said, but before she could figure out how to ask, the first complication came. Neoma had a shift at the clinic she couldn't miss. Dr. Obi had been short-staffed all week, and she'd already called in sick once to go to dinner with Chidi. She couldn't do it again, but Chidi had planned something special, a surprise dinner at his penthouse. He texted her that morning, 7 p.m. "Dress nice, I have something to tell you." Her stomach flipped. She called him. "Chidi, I'm so sorry, but I have to work tonight. Can we do tomorrow instead?" There was a pause. Then, "Tomorrow I'm flying to Abuja." "Oh." Another pause. Longer this time. "It's okay," he said finally. "We'll reschedule." But she could hear the disappointment in his voice. She hung up and sat on the edge of the mattress, her head in her hands. Adaze, painting her nails in the corner, said casually, "I could go." Neoma looked up. "What?" "I could go to the dinner." Adaze didn't look at her, kept her eyes on her nails. "Just this once. You're at work. I'll just smile and nod and say you're not feeling well or something. He won't know." "Ada, no." "Why not?" Adaze finally met her eyes. "We're identical, Nay. He won't be able to tell." "That's not the point. I can't lie to him." "You wouldn't be lying. I would." Adaze set down the nail polish. "Look, Mama needs medicine. The pills the doctor prescribed cost $15,000. We don't have $15,000. But if you keep canceling on him, he's going to lose interest. Rich men don't wait." Neoma's chest tightened. "I don't know." "Just this once," Adaze said. "I'll be you for 2 hours. Then it's done." Neoma looked at Mama, looked at the bottle of pills on the floor, already half empty, looked at her sister. "Just this once," she said. Adaze prepared like she was going to war. She showered using Neoma's soap, the cheap one from the market. She wore Neoma's best dress, the blue one with the flowers. She put on Neoma's perfume, the floral scent that smelled like desperation and hope. She studied her sister's mannerisms, the way Neoma covered her mouth when she laughed, the way she tilted her head when she listened, the way she touched her collarbone when she was nervous. Adaz practiced in the mirror. When the driver came to pick her up, Chidi had sent a car. She climbed in and didn't look back. The penthouse was everything she'd imagined and more. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of the city that made her breath catch, the kind of space where you could scream and not hear an echo. Chidi was waiting in the living room, a bottle of wine open on the table. He smiled when he saw her. "You made it." "I did," Adaze said, and she was careful to make her voice soft, uncertain, the way Neoma's always was. He pulled out a chair for her. She sat. He poured wine into 2 glasses, and she took hers carefully, the way Neoma would, like she was afraid it might break. The dinner was perfect. The food was perfect. Chidi talked about his day, about the deal he was closing in Abuja, about how tired he was of traveling. Adaz nodded, smiled, said very little. He noticed. "You're quiet tonight," he said. "I'm just tired," Adaz said quickly. "Work was busy." You work too hard, she smiled, said nothing. Chidi reached across the table and took her hand. His thumb brushed her knuckles. I'm glad you came, he said. Adaizi felt something shift in her chest. Not guilt. Not yet. Power. When he walked her to the door at the end of the night, he leaned down and kissed her. Soft. Brief. The kind of kiss that promised more. Adaizi kissed him back. And when the driver dropped her off 2 streets from the flat, she walked home in the dark, her heart pounding, her mind racing. She'd done it. She'd been Neoma, and no one knew. It happened again 2 weeks later. Neoma had another shift. Adaizi volunteered before she could even ask. You're tired. Let me go. Ada, I don't think... He won't know, Ne. I promise. This time, Neoma hesitated less. Mama's medical bills were piling up. The clinic had reduced Neoma's hours. Chidi had started paying for things, dinners, transport, small gifts, and Neoma was grateful, but she couldn't bring herself to ask for more. Adaizi could, not directly, but she could be there, could smile, could keep him interested. Just this once, Neoma said again, but it wasn't just once. It became a pattern. Adaizi learned Neoma's stories, her memories, the things she told Chidi about her childhood. She learned which jokes made him laugh, which silences made him lean closer. She learned how to be Neoma better than Neoma could. And Chidi, busy and distracted and in love, didn't notice. 6 months in, Chidi proposed. It was a quiet evening at the penthouse. Just the two of them. No fanfare, no big production. He got down on one knee in the living room, the city lights glittering behind him, and pulled out a small velvet box. He said, I don't need anything else. Just you. Neoma, the real Neoma, started crying before he even opened the box. The ring was platinum, simple, perfect, the kind of ring that didn't scream wealth, but whispered it. Yes, she said, her voice breaking. Yes. He slipped the ring on her finger and she kissed him, and for a moment, everything was perfect. Adaizi saw the ring that night. Neoma came home glowing, holding out her hand, the platinum band catching the light from the flickering bulb. He proposed, she whispered, tears still on her cheeks. Ada, he proposed. Adaizi stared at the ring. She should have been happy. She should have hugged her sister, congratulated her, celebrated. But all she could think was, that should have been me. She forced a smile. I'm so happy for you, Nan. But her mind was already turning. 2 days later, Adaizi said it. They were alone in the flat. Mama was at the hospital for tests. Neoma was staring at the ring, still unable to believe it was real. We should keep switching, Adaizi said. Neoma looked up, confused. What? After the wedding, we should keep switching. Adaizi sat down beside her, her voice calm, reasonable. Just until Mama's surgery is paid for. Then we stop. Ada, no. Ne, listen to me. Adaizi took her sister's hands. The surgery costs $300,000. We don't have it. Chidi does, but you're too proud to ask. So let me help. Let me be you sometimes, just until we get the money. Then it's over. I promise. I can't do that to him, Neoma said, her voice shaking. I can't lie. You won't be lying. I will. That's the same thing. It's not. Adaizi's grip tightened. He loves you. Nay. He's going to marry you. This doesn't change that. It just buys us time. Neoma pulled her hands away, stood, paced the small room. No, won't do it. Then Mama dies. The words hung in the air like smoke. Neoma turned, her eyes wide. Don't say that. It's true. Adaizi stood, her voice hard now. The doctor said she has maybe 2 months, maybe less. If we don't get the money, she dies. And you'll spend the rest of your life in that big house with your rich husband, knowing you could have saved her but didn't. That's not fair. Life isn't fair. Adaizi's voice cracked. You think I want this? You think I want to pretend to be you? I don't. But I'm trying to save our mother, and you're worried about lying to your boyfriend. Neoma's face crumpled. She sank onto the mattress, her head in her hands. From the corner, Mama's voice, weak and hoarse. Stop fighting. They both turned. Mama was awake, staring at them with tired, cloudy eyes. You're all I have, she whispered. Don't fight. Neoma looked at her mother, looked at her sister, and broke. Okay, she whispered. Okay, just until Mama is safe. Adaizi exhaled. Just until Mama is safe. But neither of them believed it. The wedding was small. Chidi didn't want a circus. Just close family, a few friends, a quiet ceremony at a chapel in Lekki. Neoma walked down the aisle in a white dress she'd chosen herself, Simple, elegant, nothing like the extravagant gowns in the bridal magazines. Chidi watched her approach, and his face softened in a way that made her chest ache. In the second row, Adaeze sat perfectly still. She wore the same shade of lipstick as her sister. She smiled when Neoma said, "I do." And when Chidi kissed his bride, Adaeze looked down at her hands and wondered how long she could keep this going. How long before he noticed? How long before it all fell apart? Married life was supposed to be simple. Neoma moved into the penthouse 3 days after the wedding. Chidi had cleared space in his closet for her clothes, though she didn't have many, and bought her things she insisted she didn't need. Lotions that smelled like flowers she couldn't name, shoes she was afraid to wear, a robe so soft it felt like sin. She tried to settle in, tried to be a wife, but 2 nights a week she went to Yaba. To see Mama, she told Chidi. And he believed her. Why wouldn't he? What he didn't know was that on those nights, Adaeze came to the penthouse in her place. The first few switches were careful, planned. Adaeze would arrive after dark wearing Neoma's perfume, her hair styled the same way. She'd slip into the penthouse like a shadow, and Chidi, tired from work, distracted by calls and emails, barely noticed. But Adaeze noticed everything. She noticed the Egyptian cotton sheets, the rain shower with 6 settings, the wine fridge, the espresso machine, the view that stretched all the way to the lagoon. She noticed how easy it was to live like this, and she started to want it. At first, she was subtle. She moved a picture frame on the shelf, angled it differently. Chidi didn't say anything. She ordered a throw pillow online, navy blue velvet, and placed it on the couch. Chidi glanced at it once, shrugged, went back to his laptop. She got bolder. She used his card to buy a pair of shoes she'd seen on Instagram. Then a handbag. Then a silk scarf she didn't need but wanted. Chidi never checked the statements. And slowly, carefully, Adaeze began to believe she deserved this. She started to feel like Neoma. No, better than Neoma. She could be the wife Chidi needed. Polished, ambitious, someone who understood the world he lived in. One night after Chidi fell asleep beside her, Adaeze lay awake staring at the ceiling and thought, what if I just stayed? What if Neoma never came back? The thought should have scared her. It didn't. Chidi started noticing things. Small things at first. Some nights, Neoma was soft and easy, curling into him on the couch, laughing at his jokes. Other nights, she was distant, distracted, her touch careful and deliberate, like she was performing. Some mornings, she made tea exactly the way he liked it. 2 sugars, a splash of milk. Other mornings, she forgot and made it plain. Once he mentioned a conversation they'd had about his mother, a story Neoma had told him about growing up in the village. A week later, he brought it up again, and she looked at him blankly. I don't remember telling you that, she said. He laughed it off. You were probably tired. But the inconsistencies piled up. Her handwriting looked different on the grocery list. Her laugh sounded sharper. She couldn't make fried plantains the way she used to, the ones that were crispy on the outside, soft in the middle, perfect. I forgot the trick, she said, smiling apologetically. Chidi touched his watch and said nothing. Then his mother came to visit. Mama Okafor arrived from Enugu unannounced, the way she always did, with 2 suitcases and a list of opinions. She was a small woman, sharp-eyed and sharp-tongued, the kind of mother who could see through walls. She sat in the living room, her wrapper tied tight around her waist, and looked at Neoma, except it wasn't Neoma. It was Adaeze. Come, Mama Okafor said, patting the seat beside her. Sit with me. Adaeze sat, her spine straight, her smile polite. So, Mama Okafor said, tell me about your people, your mother's village. What is it called again? Adaeze's mind went blank. Neoma had mentioned it once. Umwaka, Adaeze said. A name, something with 3 syllables. Mama Okafor's eyes narrowed. Umwaka? I thought you said Umuna. Yes, Adaeze said quickly. Umuna. I misspoke. Mama Okafor leaned back, studying her. And your father, what did he do before he passed? He was a teacher. A teacher? Mama Okafor tilted her head. Chidi told me he was a farmer. Adaeze's pulse quickened. He did both, taught during the week, farmed on weekends. Mama Okafor said nothing, just watched. When Chidi came into the room, his mother stood and gestured for him to follow her into the kitchen. What is it, Mama? Chidi asked. She closed the door and lowered her voice. Something is wrong with that girl. What do you mean? She is not. Mama Okafor searched for the word. Whole. She is different. Some days she is one person. Some days she is another. Chidi frowned. She's just adjusting. Marriage is new for her. No. Mama Okafor shook her head. This is not adjustment. This is something else. You need to watch her. Chidi wanted to argue, wanted to defend Neoma, but the seed was planted. He started watching, and once he started, he couldn't stop. He noticed that some days she hummed while she cooked. Other days she was silent. Some days she touched his face gently, her fingers soft. Other days she kissed him like she was trying to prove something. Some days she called him Chidi. Other days, Chi. One evening, he came home early and found her rearranging the bookshelf. She froze when she saw him. What are you doing? He asked. Just organizing. You organized it last week. She laughed nervously. I forgot. Chidi didn't laugh. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay beside her, beside whoever she was, and felt something crack inside his chest. The next morning, he made a call. The private investigator's name was Mr. Arenzi. He was quiet, efficient, expensive. Chidi hired him with one instruction: follow my wife. Mr. Arenzi didn't ask questions. He followed Neoma for a week. Watched her leave the penthouse in the mornings, return in the evenings. Watched her take a taxi to Yaba twice, entering a narrow building with peeling paint. And then he saw them. 2 women, identical. One leaving the building in the morning, one entering at night. Mr. Arenzi took photos. When he brought them to Chidi, he laid them out on the desk in a neat row. Sir, he said carefully, there are 2 of them. Chidi stared at the photos. His hands didn't shake. His face didn't change. Thank you, he said quietly. Mr. Arenz left. Chidi sat alone in his office, looking at the pictures. 2 women, same face, same body, different lives. He touched his watch. Then he stood, grabbed his keys, and drove to Yaba. It was evening when he arrived. The street was narrow, crowded, loud. Children played football in the dust. A woman sold roasted corn on the corner. The building was exactly as Mr. Arenzi had described. Paint peeling, staircase cracked, the smell of kerosene and old water hanging in the air. Chidi climbed the stairs slowly. He found the door. Number 7. He knocked. Neoma opened the door. She froze. Behind her, a daisy stood in the middle of the room, wearing the same dress Neoma had worn that morning. Mama Ezzy was asleep on the mattress in the corner, her breathing shallow. Chidi stepped inside. His eyes moved from Neoma to Daisy, back to Neoma. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Chidi said, very quietly, "How long?" Neoma's face crumpled. She started crying immediately, her hands covering her mouth. Adez lifted her chin, her jaw tight. "Chidi, I can explain," Neoma started. He raised a hand. "How long?" The room went silent. Even Mama stirred, her eyes opening, cloudy and confused. Neoma sank into a chair, her whole body shaking. 6 months, she whispered. Chidi closed his eyes. "Open them. 6 months," he repeated. "I'm sorry," Neoma sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted. Ada said it was just until Mama's surgery. I didn't know how to stop." "Stop talking," Chidi said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut like glass. He turned to Adez. "And you?" She didn't cry, didn't flinch. "You don't know what it's like," she said, "to have nothing, to watch your mother die because you can't pay a bill. I did what I had to do. You were in my bed," Chidi said slowly. "You kissed me. You let me believe." He stopped, swallowed. "And you feel nothing?" Adez looked away. Chidi stood there, silent, his chest rising and falling. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out his checkbook. He wrote slowly, carefully, tore the check free, placed it on the table. 300,000 naira. "For your mother," he said, "not for you." He looked at Neoma. Her face was wet, her eyes red. "I loved you," he said. "I would have helped. You just had to ask." Neoma reached for him, her hands trembling. "Please, please, Chidi, I love you. I made a mistake." He stepped back. "No," he said. "You made a choice. Chidi, I can't trust which one of you I'm talking to anymore." The words hung in the air. Neoma broke. She collapsed, sobbing, her hands clutching at nothing. Chidi turned and walked to the door. He paused, his hand on the frame. "Get Mama the surgery," he said. "Then stay away from me." He left. The door closed softly behind him, and in the small flickering room the twins sat in silence, the check on the table between them. The divorce was quiet. No drama, no lawyers screaming in courtrooms, Just paperwork, signatures, the clean severing of something that had never been whole. Chidi paid for Mama Eze's surgery, as promised. He transferred the money directly to the hospital, not to Naoma. He didn't want her gratitude, didn't want her tears. He blocked both their numbers, changed his routine, avoided Yaba, stopped going to places they'd been together. He told himself he was fine. But at night, alone in the penthouse, he touched his watch and thought of her. Not them. Her. The woman who'd smiled at him in the clinic, the woman who'd shared rice with the nurses, the woman who'd looked at him like he was just a man, not a bank account. He wondered if she'd ever been real. Mama Eze survived the surgery. It took weeks of recovery, but slowly, steadily, she healed. The cough faded. The color returned to her face. She could sit up without gasping, walk to the bathroom without help. Naoma cried the first time Mama stood on her own. Adaze didn't. The check had saved Mama's life, but it hadn't saved them. The twins barely spoke anymore. They moved around the flat like ghosts, careful not to touch, not to look at each other too long. One night, 3 months after the surgery, Adaze packed a bag. "I'm leaving," she said. Naoma looked up from where she sat beside Mama. "Where? Does it matter? Ada? Don't!" Adaze's voice was hard. "Don't try to fix this. You got what you wanted. Mama's alive. I'm done." She left without saying goodbye. Naoma watched the door close and felt nothing. She went back to school. It took a year of saving, of working double shifts at the clinic, but Naoma enrolled in a nursing program at a small college in Yaba. She studied at night, her textbooks spread across the same mattress where Mama now slept peacefully. She was good at it. Better than good. The teachers noticed. The patients noticed. She had a gift for care, for seeing people, for making them feel less afraid. 2 years later, she graduated top of her class. She got a job at a private hospital in Victoria Island. The pay was decent. The work was hard. But for the first time in her life, Naoma felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She met a man there, a teacher named Emeka, not Chidi's driver, a different Emeka. He taught literature at a secondary school in Surulere. He had kind eyes and a gentle laugh and a patience that made her feel safe. He didn't have money, didn't have a penthouse or a Patek Philippe. But he saw her, really saw her. They dated for a year. He proposed with a simple gold band he'd saved for 6 months to buy. She said yes. They married quietly, just family, at a chapel in Ibude Meta. Mama cried. Naoma smiled. And for the first time since the night Chidi walked out of that flat in Yaba, she felt whole. Chidi was 43 when he saw her again. He was at a private hospital in Victoria Island, visiting a friend who'd had knee surgery. He'd brought flowers, yellow roses, impersonal and expensive, and was walking down a corridor looking for the room number when he turned a corner and stopped. She was standing by the nurse's station. Naoma. She wore scrubs, blue, with a badge clipped to the pocket. Her hair was shorter now, cut into a neat professional style. She was laughing at something a colleague had said, her whole body shaking with it, the way it used to. Chidi's chest tightened. He should leave, turn around, walk away. But he couldn't move. And then he saw it. The gold band on her left hand. Simple, worn, loved. She was married. His breath caught. She looked happy. Not the nervous, uncertain happiness she'd had with him. This was deeper, steadier. The kind of happiness that didn't need expensive dinners or marble floors. She looked free. Naoma felt someone watching her. She turned and her smile faded. Chidi. He stood in the middle of the hallway, holding a bouquet of yellow roses, his face unreadable. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Naoma's colleague said something, and she blinked, came back to herself. She nodded once. A small, sad acknowledgement. Chidi nodded back. That was all. He didn't approach her. Didn't say her name. Didn't ask how she'd been, if she was happy, if she ever thought of him. He just turned and walked down the hallway, past the fluorescent lights, past the smell of antiseptic and floor cleaner, past the open doors where families sat beside hospital beds. His chest felt tight. He touched his watch. Outside, his driver was waiting. The leather seats were cool. The city noise was muffled, distant. Chidi sat in the back and closed his eyes. He thought about the woman in the clinic who'd offered him water, the woman who'd shared rice with nurses, the woman who'd looked at him and said, "I see you." He thought about how he loved her. And he realized with a clarity that made his throat ache that he'd never truly seen her. He'd seen a simple woman, a poor woman, someone he could save. He'd never asked what she dreamed of, never asked what she wanted beyond him. He'd loved the idea of her, not the person. And now she was someone else's wife, someone else's dream, someone who'd loved her enough to let her become who she was meant to be. Chidi opened his eyes. The car was moving through traffic, the city sprawling endlessly around him. He was alone, and he always would be. Neoma watched him go. She stood at the nurse's station, her hand resting on her belly, just barely rounded. 12 weeks. Her colleague nudged her. "You okay?" "Yeah," Neoma said softly. "I'm okay." She picked up a patient chart and went back to work. That evening, her husband met her at the hospital entrance. Emeka was holding a small bag of Puff Puff he'd bought from a woman on the street. He kissed her forehead. "How was your day?" he asked. "Long," she said, "but good." They walked to the bus stop together, his hand in hers. At home, Mama was waiting. She'd cooked jollof rice and the flat smelled like tomatoes and thyme. Neoma sat at the small table, her husband beside her, her mother across from her, and ate. The fluorescent bulb still flickered. The floor was still cracked, but the soup was thick now. And there was meat. Neoma smiled. She was happy, deeply, genuinely happy. And somewhere across the city, in a penthouse that overlooked the lagoon, Chidi Okafor sat alone in the dark and touched his watch and thought of a woman he'd loved but never known. Neoma, months later, in the hospital nursery, holding her newborn daughter. The baby has her gap-toothed smile. Emeka stands beside her, his hand on her shoulder. Mama Eze, healthy now, sits in a chair nearby, crying happy tears. Outside the window, Lagos sprawls, loud, messy, beautiful, unforgiving. And somewhere in that city, two people who once loved each other live separate lives, carrying the weight of choices made in desperation, in hope, in fear. The billionaire who married a twin, and the woman who became herself only after she lost him. If that twist pulled you in, do me a favor, like this video, subscribe for more gripping stories, and leave a comment. I want to know, at what moment would you have seen the truth?